Okay. So we start with the questions and answer. Um, So Bhante, one question from there's a Dr. Anjani Jalaj. She asking that is any disease happening in one's life is due to past karma or any abnormality detected in the body, which causes for the disease uh, we have to take it.
No, the idea that everything we experience in our lives is the result of past karma is one which was criticized by the Lord Buddha and which is usually identified with the Jain religion. The Buddhist understanding is that we all have some karmic inheritance from past life or past lives, but that inheritance may be looked on more as the raw material with which we make our life. It's not a determining factor as such. It's not our fate. So we have certain predispositions. We have certain family situation, our economic circumstance, whether rich or poor, these kind of things can all be attributed to past life, the karma we made in past lives. But the question is what we do with those raw materials and our capacity to deal wisely with old karma and create constructive new karma is enhanced by the practice of the Eightfold Path. So, in other words, the more that you practice the Eightfold Path, then the less that your life will be conditioned by old karma. I think that we can draw a comparison with the scientific studies of the relative importance of nature and nurture. So in that realm, in the scientific realm, they obviously don't refer to old karma, but they refer to genetic inheritance. But I think we can say there is a great deal of overlap there. And after many studies of identical twins having the same genetic makeup but brought up in different environments, as far as I know, the current consensus is that our lives are maybe half, 50% due to our DNA and our physical inheritance, and 50% due to our environment. So that's a scientific view of a similar question. So we could maybe say that there's 50% of old karma, but as I say, it's not a fixed thing. The more that you practice the Dhamma, the more mindfulness you have, the more spiritual maturity you have, the more you're able to deal skillfully with the given, that which you are faced with or that which surrounds you, and thus make good new karma, which can outweigh the unwholesome bad karma and can further develop the wholesome good karma that has been created in the past.
Bhante. Next question is what is the meaning of merits? And the lady saying that we have a wish to gain the merits. Is it not a greed?
Is it not what?
It is a kind of a greed. We have a wish to gain the merits. Means people donate and meditate like that.
Um, it can be seen like that. So the word punya in Pali doesn't really have an English equivalent. So we've been using merit since the day of the Pali Text Society translators, and I think most of us translators and practitioners have more or less just decided to stick with merit. But merit, I think, most simply can just be summarized as good karma. When we make good karma through body, speech, or mind, then we are making merit. I think that an associated idea is that making merit is often very joyful experience, and that joyfulness of doing good is sometimes taken to represent merit itself, although the fundamental idea is of a purification of actions of the heart, of emotion, and of wisdom. So punya or merit is, I think, a little bit more circumscribed than kusala, which is the associated term, and that's wider and more profound. But the Buddha did make the point that when we act in good ways, when we make good karma, or where we make merit, then the purification that takes place will be reduced if there is some greed for some result of merit. So if you make merit without greed for some result, you will make a lot of merit. Whereas if you make merit with greed for a result, then the merit will be reduced because there's a sense of self and there is unwholesome intention there. So it's not that no merit is made, but it's rather a shame that the merit is unnecessarily weakened through greed for some result in the future. So if we take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, then we feel this is our life work. This is, how we really express ourselves as human beings in the abandonment of the unwholesome, the development of the wholesome, and the purification of the heart. And we take joy in that purification, and that's how merit will accrue to us. Nevertheless, we have to acknowledge that in explaining the law of karma in great detail during his life, the Buddha did make the point on many occasions that the purification of body, speech, and mind, the making of merit, does lead to a happy life in this life, but also in future lives. So those people who make merit with the wish for a heavenly rebirth, that's not foolish. It's not that it won't happen, but that the greed for it to happen is unnecessarily hampering that effort.
Bhante, another question from another lady. She asked me that, Bhante, we taking lot of efforts in meditation and practicing Sila, but if we not attain any path and fruition stages, then where we will take next birth?
Well, it's a matter of creating the causes and conditions for human birth, creating the strong link through refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So if you're keeping precepts and you've taken refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, you're keeping precepts and you're trying to purify your body, speech, and mind, then you're creating the very strong supporting conditions for rebirth in a human realm and in a country and in a society or an environment in which you will have access to the Buddha Dhamma and the opportunity to further your practice.
In family life, we face many problems. Then how to handle these obstacles in meditation?
Well, the problems that we face in daily life and the problems that we face in meditation tend to be very similar, to reflect each other. That is to say that the internal factors in our mind, which are a cause of problems in the world, will manifest in our mind during meditation. And so meditation should not be seen as a way of escaping from the world for a period of time, but it's a way that we can create the necessary conditions to be able to identify and let go of the negative mental states, of the defilements that cause us so many problems in our daily life. We can to understand how greed works, how aversion works, how jealousy works, how confusion and anxiety works, how depression works. When we simplify our external surroundings and we close our eyes and we start to look directly at the body and mind, then we begin to see how all these things occur in our mind, what feeds them and what reduces them. At the same time, the inner relaxation and peace that comes, and the patience that we develop, and the mindfulness that we develop, these are qualities that help us to be able to face up to our problems in daily life and to deal with them effectively.
Bhante, is laughing comes from defilements?
There is I believe, I'm not a great Abhidhamma scholar, but I believe I've been told or I've read that the Theravada Abhidhamma considers laughing to be a non-enlightened, let's say a non-enlightened expression. So I don't know what to say. I have in my life, I've been fortunate enough to study with and to spend time with teachers who I believe to have realized Maggaphala Bana, and they all, I've seen all of them laugh at one time or another. So I think I don't want to disrespect the Abhidhamma, but my personal experience would not lead me to agree with it on that particular point.
Bhante, another question. What is the quality of Kalyan Mitta, excellent friend?
I think that, Kalyana Mittata, creating networks of good friendships, this is the essential basis for a Buddhist community of any size. And I think we can distinguish between Kalyana Mitta on the everyday level, let's say, between husband and wife and parents and children and people who work together, simply as making an effort, excuse me, making an effort to help each other to overcome our defilements. We all have blind spots, and we all have pride and difficulty in letting things go, and having good friends who can help us, can give us feedback, and who can support us in our Dhamma practice is a wonderful thing. And for us to make that effort ourselves to help those around us to be able to let go of their defilements and to grow further in the Dhamma. So this would be a basic level of good friendship. So we see it in light of kusala and akusala dhammas that we have in ourselves and in others. We are open, we make ourselves open, we invite people that we trust to give us feedback about our mistakes and our defilements, and in turn we support others in their practice to overcome the unwholesome and develop the wholesome. As you know, I think in Theravada, then we don't have the idea of the guru that we find in Hindu teachings or even in Tibetan Buddhism, and the teacher is identified as the good friend. Even the Buddha himself is the supreme good friend. In the qualities of the good friend on this level, on the level of spiritual teacher, then the Buddha spoke of 7 qualities. One is the teacher inspires affection, inspires love, inspires affection. Secondly, he inspires respect. And the Kalyana Mitta will be someone who, in which there is a balance. Some teachers, maybe they inspire a great deal of affection and love in their disciples, but maybe not so much respect for them, and maybe it's too close and too informal a relationship. Some teachers maybe stress the respect side too much and then lack the heart connection. So there is a balance. As a teacher is someone who inspires both affection, love, and respect. He also is an inspiration and example to others. Someone, the Kalyana Mitra is someone who you find inspires you to emulate them and to follow in their footsteps. The good friend, the Kalyana Mitra, on this level, someone who's very patient with his students or her students, and puts up with the loka dhammas and all the ups and downs and difficulties of trying to help other people. He's not easily discouraged. Then the Kalyana Mitta has 2 important communication skills. One, he said, or she is able to adapt his way of talking to in an appropriate manner, so that he or she can teach the Dhamma to people who have studied a lot or people who have studied very little, can talk to people from different faculties, someone who has digested the Dhamma to the extent that they can choose the right expressions of Dhamma for their students or listeners. And associated with this slightly different point is someone who can express the most profound points of Dhamma in a simple, easily or reasonably easy idiom. So it's sometimes there is a demand to express things simply to the extent that the simplification deviates, doesn't fully represent the full profundity of the Dhamma. But the Kalyanamitta is someone who can speak simply, but is in no way betrays the profound nature of the more complex teachings. And finally, the Kalyanamitta is someone who does not take unfair advantage of his or her spiritual authority for any personal gain, whether it's a material gain or a gain of prestige or fame or whatever. She never leads their student in an improper direction or a false direction. So these are the 7 qualities of the spiritual teacher as Kalyanamitta, as good friend, that the Buddha gave us to be someone who's worthy of affection or inspires affection, inspires respect, inspires the wish to emulate and to follow in their footsteps, is someone who's patient with the students, is someone who has developed communication skills to be able to express the Dhamma in an appropriate way, so appropriate to his audience, is someone who can explain profound topics in a straightforward, accessible way, and someone who never takes advantage of his or her authority to in a way which is detrimental to the welfare of the student.
What happens to defilements when we do anapana? What is so special about observing breathing that leads to escape from birth and death?
Well, anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing, is just one of many different techniques that are used to create and sustain a stream of mindfulness. So it's an object of mindfulness. So what we want to do is to create this stream of mindfulness. And when mindfulness is uninterrupted, then after a sufficient period of time, the mind will become very stable and clear and bright and sharp. And that is the state of samadhi. So samadhi is a word for the unbroken stream of mindfulness. And when the samadhi has occurred, then many defilements will not appear temporarily. And that gives the meditator the opportunity to look into the body and mind and to investigate the 3 characteristics. So to put this another way, without samadhi, the mind does not have sufficient stability or clarity to investigate the 3 characteristics. That samadhi is gained through developing mindfulness. And again, mindfulness is not working alone. There are 3 important dhammas that work together as a team, as it were. So there is mindfulness, and then sampajanya, or clear comprehension, and then atapi, which is another word for right effort. So there must be mindfulness is not forgetting the object, and sampajanya is that knowing of the object, remembering knowing the goal and the present state of the mindfulness practice, for instance, whether it's too tight or it's too loose. and atapi is right effort. So when there is the right effort, there is mindfulness, there is sampajanya, then the mind will go beyond the defilements which we call hindrances. But it is only a temporary release from them. But that temporary release gives the mind the necessary power and clarity to do the work of wisdom. So Anapanasati is one of the favored meditation objects, and over the past 2,500 and more years, many meditators, both monastic and lay men and women, have made use of this simple practice of mindfulness of breathing on the path to enlightenment. But it's not compulsory, and it's not necessarily the best practice for everyone. But in teaching larger groups of people, it's not possible to give customized meditation objects to every single person. And so Anapanasati is that which most people can benefit from, and even those who don't have any real affinity with it or find it difficult are not harmed by doing it. So that's why it's put at the forefront of most meditation teachings. In my monastery, in my monastic training, Ajahn would teach mindfulness of breathing, often together with use of the mantra Buddho. But if monks found that that was not working for them, then he might have them work more on the Asubha meditation, reflecting on the unattractive parts of the body, or investigating the four elements. And so there were alternatives if Anapanasati just wasn't working. And when I say not working, I don't mean just for a short period of time and it's difficult and you give up. It means over a number of months. Any meditation object, you have to stick with it for at least a few months before deciding to make a change.
Bante, nearly more questions. So how much time we have?
Oh, how much time do you have? What's the
Yeah.
time? Yeah, we can go until, yeah, just keep going. I'll tell you when I run out of steam.
Okay, Bante. Bante, another question is, in what way can a householder fulfill Nekkhamma Parami?
Well, the most popular approach is to keep the 8 precepts on the at least on the full moon and the dark moon, so twice a month. And in northeast Thailand and in many Buddhist countries, there may every 8th day the moon as well. So approximately once a week, 4 times a month, taking the 8 precepts. Because you will have observed that the difference between the 8 precepts and the 5 precepts is not one of increasing like moral, the intensity of like moral or ethical standards, but this is the introduction of nekkhamma practices. So for instance, it is obviously not immoral or evil to eat in the evening. So that 6th precept of refraining from eating in the evening is not to make you a better person or to stop you creating bad karma, but its effect is to free up time that would otherwise be spent in the preparation of food, the consumption of food, the digestion of food, and gives one more time for studying and practicing the Dhamma. Similarly, with refraining from beautifying the body or for looking at news and entertainments of various kinds, these are meant to strengthen the power of nekama. Also, the practice of meditation has an important role to play in that when the meditation starts to develop and there is the experience of inner peace from samadhi and the joy of the well-trained mind, then the pull towards karma, towards the sensual world, weakens. Now we all, everyone, we all heard all people say that true happiness lies within. You don't have to look for it outside yourself. And everybody I think most people pay lip service to that, but nobody really believes it until they have some direct experience. And when you have a direct experience of samadhi of one level or another, then it's a proof. You have this inarguable proof that it is possible to experience great happiness and contentment without having to enjoy forms and sounds and odors and tastes and so on. So nekama is a natural result of the experience of samadhi. One's relationship to one's attitude towards the sensual world changes. So these two things together, a regular nekama practice, for instance, taking 8 precepts once a week on the half full, half dark moon, and to during the year to do at least one meditation retreat, one course in which you keep 8 precepts for the duration of the course, and to give yourself that experience of removing yourself from sensual pleasures and temptations on a regular basis. That's strengthening nekama. And then when that is combined with practice of samadhi and ideally the experience of the happiness which is separate from sensuality, then nekama will become stronger and stronger, whether you are a monastic or a layperson.
Bhante, how to increase our faith and how to make our determination stronger?
Yeah, well, faith or sattha in Buddhism has some specific or unique qualities, and the I would say that in a number of the major world religions, the monotheistic religions that put faith at the very heart of their religion, then they tend to identify themselves in terms of their faith and to consider that the more faith you have, the better. So, whereas in Buddhism, not being a belief system in the same way that those religions are, Buddhism being essentially an education system, then faith is looked at in a rather different way. And the Buddha emphasize that faith should always be governed by the wisdom faculty, because without it, faith can easily turn into superstition or fanaticism. So in Buddhism, we see faith as a tool to be used in this education and this training that the Buddha gave us. And the value of faith is that if it is well-founded, then it energizes the mind. It brings forth energy and effort. But if faith is lacking in wisdom, then, as I say, it can turn into either fanaticism or superstition. So the way to prevent faith from causing problems more than being the pathway to the Dhamma begins with making this very clear distinction between believing in something and knowing something. So many religious people get caught in the circular reasoning. They say that I believe in something, and if you say, well, how do you know it's true? Well, I believe it because it's true. And you say, well, how do you know it's true? And they will say, well, the moment I heard, the moment I read something, I just felt it. I just knew that it was true. So here there's an important distinction between believing and knowing something which has been overlooked. So this circular reasoning is, I believe it because it's true, and it's true because I believe it. So the Buddha pointed out that it is very possible for human beings to believe 100% in things which are not true. And we can all think of examples of that. So the Buddha is saying, this, however strong your faith may be, that doesn't mean that what you believe in is true. It's a different matter. So as Buddhists, we try to be very humble, and we can say, I believe in this, I believe in that, but I don't yet know it for sure. I haven't experienced it directly. This is such an important distinction. So in our study of Buddhism, it's important that we are constantly observing our body and mind and trying to put the Buddha's teaching into practice in our daily life. It's not just a matter of learning something, memorizing it. That doesn't work. That's not faith. Don't lead to faith that we desire in Buddhism. But when we start to look into our life and observe, then again and again and again in daily life, we get this reinforcement. Oh, yes, that's exactly as the Buddha said. Oh, yes. When we don't get what we want, then we suffer. Oh, yes. Being separated from people that we love and we like is painful. And we're constantly proving to ourselves the truth of the Buddha's teachings in our daily life, in just very basic matters. And so we're constantly saying, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yeah, oh yes. And faith arises from and becomes very strong, not just because of an act of faith, yes, I believe, but because the Buddha's teachings are teachings about the nature of reality, about what it is to be a human being. And so we have an opportunity every day, many, many times, to put the Buddha's analysis of human life to the test. And this is exactly what he wanted us to do. It's ehipasikatam, come and see, come and put it to the test. And so the faith arises because we are constantly doing that. And the more that we look into our hearts and we look into our lives and lives of those around us, it becomes clearer and clearer. Yes, that as long as we have defilements in our mind, in our heart, we're never going to be truly happy. We're always going to suffer because suffering arises through defilements. And if we want true happiness, true peace, then we need to develop all these kusala dhammas. And so when we see clearly through trying to apply Buddha's teaching in daily life, then the faith and determination to practice arise. So this is the particular role of faith. The more the faith arises, the more you're willing to put effort into the practice because you see how important it is, how necessary it is, how there's nothing else really that is so important in life than this work. So the more this reasoned faith, this faith which has wisdom governing it, is put to the test and is proven to be correct, faith leads to effort. And effort leads to mindfulness and to samadhi and to wisdom, according to teaching of the five spiritual faculties.
Bhante, when you newly ordained and not understanding Thai language, but Venerable Ajahn Chah always give Dhamma talk in Thai. So Bhante, how you maintain your patience in that situation?
Well, I think that when I first arrived and listening to very long Dhamma talks, it was more a matter of survival, really. Sitting, in the Thai style where you just have one sort of side saddle kind of style, specific to Thailand. I've never seen people sitting like this in other countries. It's very unusual. I'd been sitting cross-legged for a couple of years before I came to the monastery. But when we listen to Dhamma talk in the monastery, then the Vinaya prevents us from sitting cross-legged. In Thailand, it's considered impolite to sit cross-legged and listen to Dhamma talk from teacher. So you have to sit in this very kind of unusual and uncomfortable posture. And we had no sitting mats. We sit on a hard concrete floor, and there's no fans. So it's very hot and stuffy, and mosquitoes. So it's just a matter of enduring, just learning patience. But I think for me, certainly, having traveled right across the world to Thailand to become a monk and having found such a wonderful teacher, it gave me, but not be able to understand what he was saying, it gave me great determination to learn the Thai language. So I wonder if Ajahn Chah had spoken English, whether I would have learned the Thai language so quickly. And after I'd been there for just over a year, I could already understand quite well. So, but also, communication between teacher and student is not confined to content and the things that are taught. And indeed, myself and other Westerners who came to practice with Ajahn Chah in those days, had mostly read quite a lot of books already, maybe too many books, and had quite a good theoretical knowledge. So they weren't being deprived of important instructions, and there were enough translators and to get the basic meaning. But for me, the important thing was just to be around and to see Ajahn Chah, and to have this sense of I had this great faith in him individually that, oh, this is an arahant. So I had no special power that I could say who is or is not an arahant, but this was the faith that I had in him. And just being around someone who you believe has that kind of wisdom and insight and compassion is so uplifting in itself, and leads to a very strong teacher-pupil relationship, which is then further enriched when the language is there as well. But even in the early days, Ajahn Chah was very skilled in finding very short expressions of Dhamma, just a few words that you could take away and make use of in your practice. So I realized you don't have to, it's not so much that you need to know really to get to work on in Dhamma practice. But it's having that good example and inspiration in front of you, and having the determination and patience and humble heart that will help you.
Bhante, if possible, please share some memories of Ajahn Chah, Venerable Ajahn Chah.
Yeah, well, I've just been speaking about that a little bit. Again, I mean, for me, it was this confidence that he was speaking from personal experience rather than from books he'd read. And for that reason, even very simple statements, they went right to your heart. It was not that Ajahn Chah was necessarily teaching things that no one had ever heard before. I certainly had a great gift with language, but he was someone whose very presence uplifted you. And so, in talking about experiences with him or memories of him, it for me, it wasn't necessarily he said some very profound thing that changed my life. It was more that sometimes he said things that I'd heard many times before, read in many books, not new things at all, but hearing from him, it was like for the first time. So, oh yeah, that's what that means. That's the the value of a teacher on that level of practice. And I didn't spend that much time with him. I was 20 when I arrived at Wat Pah Pong, and he was 60. And I can remember thinking, oh, what a shame I've come, and he's such an old man already. And now I'm 63. So I'm 3 years older than Ajahn Chah was when I arrived. And I think, he wasn't that old. And but he, his teaching career was cut short by illness, and so I didn't spend that much time with him. It was 2 or 3 years after I arrived that he stopped talking, and then we turned into his nurses. But yeah, I don't have any anecdotes to tell you today. I right in my mind.
Bhante, we lay people give very much importance to heart-based feelings. Does Lord Buddha mention relationship between heart and feelings? What is the role of our heart in mental process?
Well, I'm not sure that I understand the question. We have all these different words that people understand in different ways. What is the heart? What is the feeling? What is the relationship between heart and feeling? And I think it's always a good policy to come back to the Pali language and to try to see how our modern idioms or terms that we use to refer to the mind could be expressed in Pali. So, in the word vedana, feeling, which is the sort of the hedonic element of experience, and is basically threefold: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And vedana we usually translate into English as feeling. But I presume that the questioner here is referring to like emotions and love and personally, and both positive and negative that arise in our lives. So assuming that's the case, then I would say that the Buddha talked about the cultivation or the education of emotion in the teachings on the 4 Brahma Viharas. So developing loving kindness and compassion and the ability to appreciate and rejoice in the goodness and success of others, and also the ability to maintain the mind in equanimity and evenness when that's appropriate, then those are ways in which the wholesome emotions can be trained and refined. Now, the negative emotions, Buddha would say, would be rooted in wrong view or rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. For that reason, then the negative emotions, let's say like anger and jealousy, they gradually disappear through the course of Dhamma practice. But the positive emotions, particularly of loving kindness and compassion, so on, these don't disappear. In fact, they become much stronger. And the less you identify with self and your image and what people think about you, less a sense of self, then the more empathy, the more you are able to understand others, the more you can sympathize with others, will manifest. So in the question of love, then we use this word love in many different ways, and it's rather difficult to be precise exactly what we mean by it. So we have to, if we're going to talk about love, then we do have to be more precise than we usually are, I think. But I would say from Buddhist point of view, we can look at emotion like love as a spectrum, and starting off from very unwholesome expressions, which we give the name of love, but a love with a lot of conditions. For instance, I love you, therefore you should, or if you really loved me, you'd do this, you wouldn't do that. So using love as a means to control other people or to get your own way, using love as a way of blackmailing people or making them feel guilty. These are the distortions of love. And through Dhamma practice, and particularly through development of the Brahma Viharas, then that grasping and attachment and selfishness starts to abate, becomes less. And so the quality of love becomes purer. And so at the other end of the spectrum, you'd have this pure, unconditioned love, which we call metta, or loving kindness. So in my way of looking at it, there is love, and it's a spectrum from egotistic, selfish kind of love at one end of the scale to selfless, unconditioned love on the other end. And that in lay life in particular, then the effort should be to gradually educate or purify that love, so that the distortions of it and the selfish manipulation that can often occur in so-called loving relationships becomes less. And I think that many couples, married couples, will agree that over the course of time, their love matures, and the quality of loving friendship becomes stronger and stronger, and that the sensual and the sexual side becomes less important, and a sense of being spiritual friends and having spiritual love becomes more and more dominant. And that's a kind of an evolution that can take place when both partners are devoted to practice of Dhamma.
Bhante, last two questions. There's one lady asking that when we talking, sometime in talking, in speech, we gain anger or hatred, but we understand that we getting anger and hatred, but we can't control that time. So what we have to do?
Well, as in physical health, prevention is better than cure. And so before entering into any difficult conversation, or a conversation which is liable to bring up some emotion, then we have 5 points to reflect on. These are the 5 factors of good speech. And they are that, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, is this the right time and place for this conversation? This is before we even start to talk, because there are certain things that need to be said, but if they're said at the wrong time and in the wrong place, then no good will come of it. And so that might be the physical environment, but it might be our own mental state. We're upset, we're agitated, or the other person is not in a good enough state to be able to listen and hear what we have to say. So choosing the right time and place for important conversations, if we have that opportunity and we are the person who can make that kind of decision, that's important. Secondly, we have the mindfulness of our precept, and we speak only that which is true, but also those things which are of benefit and to the other person. So there are many things that may be true, but they're trivial, or that they're of no benefit to anybody. So we have this point of mindfulness that we're not going to talk about those things. So in terms of content, the emphasis is on true and useful. And the style of speaking is polite. Politeness is important social lubricant. As long as we're being polite, then we can prevent any serious bad karma being made through our speech and speech of the other. And lastly, the intention is a good intention, not to have victory over that person or prove that you're right and they're wrong, you're good, they're bad, and so on, but genuinely constructive intention. So these are, let me recap, 5 points of consideration before any important conversation. Is this the right time and place? Am I in the right frame of mind to be able to talk about this right now? Is that other person? And when once we begin speaking, constantly mindful of, is this true? Is it beneficial? Being aware of our speech. Are we speaking politely and well? And aware of our intention. Do we have the pure intention? So these points of consideration and remembrance can keep us grounded during conversation. The other point I would suggest is that to be mindful of physical sensations in the body during a conversation, trying to breathe normally and just to have a sense of flow in the body from the head down to the feet. When you have mindfulness in the physical body, you can observe very easily if there is some emotion coming up, because emotions are not purely mental. There is always a physical counterpart. And if you're aware of some growing tension in some part of your body, and it's part of a pattern that you know you're starting to get irritated, then you can make find some way of relaxing the growing anger before it becomes too strong. In some cases, then it may be better just to humbly retreat. If you find you're getting angry and you're not expressing yourself in the way that you would like now before things get worse, you can just take time out and just tell the person, I would like to talk to you about this. I'm not running away, but I just need a few minutes, or I would like to carry on with this conversation a bit later. Would this be all right with you? In general, the development of the cultivation of mindfulness and loving kindness and patience as a regular basis, these are the wholesome dhammas which will protect your mind from anger in this kind of situation.
Bhante, I feel that you are tired now.
I'm fine. Carry on.
Okay. It's already 90 minutes. Is it okay?
It's 2014. Carry on to 8:30 my time. 7 o'clock.
Okay, Bhante. Bhante, is it possible to attain path and fruition stages only based on mindfulness?
No. The Buddha taught the Noble Eightfold Path. Right mindfulness is one of 8 factors of the Noble Path. If the if mindfulness was enough, then the Buddha would have taught the one-fold path, not the eightfold path. So mindfulness is crucially important, very, very important, but it's not solely important.
Bhante, is it if person practicing only precept for the whole lifetime, and if he not practicing mindfulness and samadhi, is it possible that he can free from his vipaka, from his bad karma results?
No, I mean by you see through practice of mindfulness and the eightfold path in general, you come to understand causality. You understand what are the causes and conditions for happiness and for growth in the Dhamma. What are the causes and conditions for decline? You know how to look after your mind. You know how to look after your actions and your speech. So without that kind of interest in your body and mind and your life and your relationships and looking and observing and learning, then it's very hard to maintain the momentum of merit and goodness that would be needed to lead you beyond the bad karma. Because the old karma. So old karma is as it manifests, how we feel it right now is like this intention to tell someone off or to be, or anger or jealousy. Where do they come from? They just sort of appear in the mind. Why does anger appear right now? Why does jealousy appear right? Well, because anger has appeared in this kind of situation in the past, and jealousy has in the past, anxiety has in the past, depression has in the past. So you're creating these like furrows in the mind, these habits. So karma manifests as habit. And so habits are not intrinsic to the mind. It doesn't mean because you have a habit that you've got to have it forevermore. But to change habits, then you do need to go against old conditioning, and there's some difficulty and tension involved. But generosity and precepts by themselves are highly unlikely to be able to deal this to affect this very profound work in the mind and this dealing with old habit energy. Of course, if you're practicing generosity on a daily basis, then you are going against the selfishness and possessiveness, and you are purifying the mind to some degree. If you're keeping 5 precepts, you're purifying the mind to some degree. But without the internal work, without the work of mindfulness and samadhi and vipassana, then you'll never be, unless you have a great deal of accumulated good karma from past lives, which is possible. I would say as a general law, you won't be able to really achieve anything lasting and profound.
Bhante, one lady asked here that I am very disturbed from my relatives. I want to live with very good relation with them, but they not. How I can make healthy relation between us?
Well, I don't think I have enough information to be able to give any very good advice here in terms of who those 4 people are. Are they older, younger, what their relationship is, what the history of the relationship is? So many things that I don't know. So I would say being we have a a bottom line. So the 5 precepts are a bottom line, and you shouldn't compromise on the 5 precepts. But in any other area, then some give and take, some flexibility, some humility is always a good idea. Think that if you are following a spiritual path, then people who are not following that path can be quite prejudiced, and they have some wrong understanding. So you have to be very patient with them. And I think also important to keep a sense of humor, not to get too self-righteous or what people don't like is the feeling that you're looking down on them and that you think you're better than they are. So be very careful not to let people form that opinion. You think, oh, now you keep precepts, you meditate, he or she, she thinks she's so much better than everybody else. So that kind of problem can come. Ask yourself and ask people that you trust, good friends of yours, if they've seen things in you that maybe contribute to the difficulties with these 4 people, because it's unlikely that it's all due to them. I'm sure there are some things within yourself, and if there's someone that you do trust, and ask them for some genuine feedback, so that if you are making things worse rather than better, then maybe you can change things around. I wish you every success. As I say, as I don't know all the details of the relationships, that's sort of general advice.
What is Amanusya and Amanusa and Deva? If we can't feel their presence, how metta works?
Well, Manusa is human being, Atmanusa is not human. So all the beings in other realms that are apart from humans, we call Amanusa. And Devas are a kind of Amanusa. They're not human. But generally when we use the word Amanut, we'll be referring to hungry ghosts and animals and beings of other realms. So animals that we can see with our eyes, they're Amanusa as well. But if we're talking about Petas and hungry ghosts and asuras and all those, then yes, hardly anybody has any direct experience and can see them or can contact them. Very, very few people, even amongst meditators. So it's just a matter you have to open your mind, use your imagination. But I don't think that you necessarily have to be able to see somebody or converse with them in order to share feelings of loving kindness with them. When we share loving kindness to fellow human beings, then we only, out of all the thousands of millions of human beings in the world, we only know a very few as personal relationships. But we can use our imagination to send our thoughts of loving kindness outwards to human beings around the world. And similarly, we can do that with creatures that we can see and creatures that we can't see. And sometimes we're developing metta, not necessarily to have to specify, but just to have that all-encompassing sense of kindness, and that includes all beings, both manusa and amanusa. And the Buddha said that those if we have metta, we have loving kindness, then we are beloved of our manusa. So we have no fear of ghosts and spirits, because these spirits feel great affection and respect for human beings that have developed metta in their heart.
Bhante, last question. Uh, how to deal with grief after death of loved one?
Well, life is painful, and first of all, I would say generally these days in the modern world that people think that there's something wrong with pain, whether it's physical pain or mental pain, and especially from wealthier countries. I shouldn't have to feel like this. But grief is like the price you pay for love. And as householders, then you could say you may not think of it as a calculation, but it is a calculation that the joy and happiness that comes from family life exceeds the grief that comes with it. But we need to accept that that's the flip side. It's the shadow side of love and affection, and all the rewards of personal love. And when we are separated from one we love, they pass away, then there will be that reckoning that has to be made. There will be that grief. But we can compare that grief to a wound. Now, if you have a wound, then that wound is not going to disappear overnight, but it will heal by itself if you keep the wound clean. And the analogy with mental pain is that we have to take care of our mind, and particularly to avoid two mistakes or two extremes. One extreme is just allowing the mind to think again and again about the person who's passed away, and what's particularly painful, unnecessarily painful, if thinking about blaming yourself or others for things that you did and said in the past, and or just allowing the mind to dwell on all the good times in such a way that the sense of missing that person becomes almost unbearable. So when the mind starts to, there's perhaps you hear something, see something, just triggers a memory. And if there's a lack of mindfulness at that point, then the mind grasps onto the memory and then runs with it, makes a story out of it, and proliferates with it. And that is maybe compared to allowing dirt to get into the wound, because the wound will never heal that way. But you also don't want to be repressing or forbidding the mind from remembering the loved one who's passed away. And I don't want to feel like this and just push it down or try to run away from it. And that's also unhealthy. So the middle way that the Buddha taught is to recognize this is a thought. This is a thought of grief. And you recognize this is grief. It's like this. And you're willing to feel grief. But you're not adding to it. You're not making it even stronger by either indulging in it or repressing it. And then it will go its way. And so every time this thought of grief arises, you're totally present. And so, this is grief. This is a thought of grief. This is what grief feels like. It's like this. And then it will pass away by itself. And over the course of time, those flashes of grief and painful memory will just start to flatten out. And the wound will gradually heal because you're keeping it clean. You're not reacting towards grief either with indulgence or repression.
But the questions are finished because it's already too much time. And Bhante, I want to say about this group. These meditators from last 6 months, nearly 200 people practicing regularly. And this month, all nearly many of them practicing Uposatha Sila for 1 month.
Oh, wonderful.
And yes, so we continuing practicing from last 6 months, and with your help also we get too much energy and inspire to practice more and more.
Wonderful.
And but they, on the behalf of all the meditators and all the members in this meeting, between these 2 hours, if we did any mistake by body, speech, mind, please forgive all of us.
I forgive you.
Yes, sadhu, 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 Bhante.
Okay.
Yes, Bhante. Uh,
So keep up your practice.
yes, Bhante.
Be consistent. And the famous encouragement by Ajahn Chah, when you feel energetic and diligent, then you practice. And when you feel lazy, then you practice. So don't let these feelings, some days you feel like you really want to practice, some days you don't. That's completely normal, but don't be conditioned by them. That's just like the weather. If you go out to, you're a farmer and you go out in the fields, and some days it's very hot, maybe some days it's cold or it's raining, but you don't decide whether you're going to farm based upon the weather. The weather's just the weather. You've got your job to do. You've got your children to feed. And similarly with practice, some days you feel really enthusiastic. Some days you feel a lot of resistance. Sometimes you feel really bored. Sometimes you feel inspired. But that's all part of it. That's part of practice. Recognizing these kinds of emotional reactions and just letting them be. And you just do your practice and you just be consistent and just keep going little by little, and you will see results.
Yes.
I'm offering you my blessing and encouragement, and it's wonderful that you're coming together in this way, and very happy to offer my support to you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhante, one request. Can I?
Mm.
Bhante, we wish. I also I also listening Dhamma talk from your Dhamma talks, then Ajahn Dhammo, and most of time I listen from last 12 to 13 year Ajahn Sumedo. So we wish to that if possible Ajahn Sumedo give us little time.
Well, Ajahn Lumpo Sumeto, he has left Thailand now. He left about 4 or 5 days ago to return to England. He's now 87 this year, and his eyesight is gone, and his ears are not so good. But his mind is still as bright and wise as has always been. But whether or not he be available and comfortable with this kind of format these days, I'm not sure. I think that Deepak, you need to write an email to his secretary, Ajahn Asoko, and ask Ajahn Asoko whether it would be possible to arrange something.
Okay.
I'll send you his email address.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you. So, Bhante, is it possible that you give us a blessing to all the meditators?
Yatha varivaha pura paripurenti sagarang evamivaito thinang petanang upakapati ichitang batitang tumhang kipamiwa samiccato sape purentu sankapa janto bhanaraso yatha manijotiraso yatha sapitio vivajanto sabharokho vinasato Matayam Movatvantarayo Sukhi Dikayuko Bhava Abhivatana Silisa Nityang Vatapachahino Chataro Thamma Vatantiyayu Vano Sukhang Halang.
Sadhu, 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 Bhante. Thank you very much, Bhante. Thank you.